The importance of your resume and your interviewing skills when leaving the military are just a few of the things that we talk about in today's episode. I had the pleasure of having Hugo Escobar on, who has served 21 years in the Air Force, split between active duty and the reserves. Welcome to Airman Vision. This is the Military Experiences and Personal Stories podcast, also known as the MEPS Podcast. Now, this podcast is for everybody who is joining the military. And the reason for that is because even if we don't want to think about it right now, whether you just want to do one enlistment or you want to do 20 plus years, there will be a life after the military. I'll be interviewing all kinds of veterans to help give you the tools that you need to succeed when you eventually do get out of the military. So whether you're looking to join, currently in, getting out, or you've been out for a while, this podcast is for you. What is your resume before you joined the Air Force?
My career path before, I was a college student full-time, and I was also working full-time in Los Angeles. I had a good job, and they were paying $12.50 an hour with medical, and back then that was a very good job. However, I got bored, and I was 23 years old. I eventually got kicked out of college. I knew that what I was doing was not working, so I thought about joining the Air Force when I was 20. So at 23, I contacted a recruiter and began the process.
And then what did you do when you were in the Air Force?
I went open general. I enlisted. I was 24 years old, and I got the job that I chose, which was I was a firefighter for 4 years, and I liked it. However, I didn't love it, and I thought I was going to serve 4 years and get out. I realized that the Air Force is a good way of life, and then I retrained into personnel, which was where I did almost 16 and a half years afterwards.
It's funny that you said that you initially were thinking of doing 4, because that seems to be a trend that I've experienced, because when I initially joined, I was leaning towards probably doing 20, and then I just did my 6 and got out. And I've heard a lot of senior enlisted leaders when I was in the Air Force were people that initially just signed a 4-year contract, were expecting to just get in, stepping stone into life, and then they ended up staying in for 20 some years. You said you were enlisted originally. Did you commission during that time when you were in the Air Force?
I did. I joined the Air Force to travel Europe. Air Force sent me to Maxwell Air Force Base, Alabama, which was home of officer training school. So I was stationed there for almost 6 years, and every 6 weeks I would see these second lieutenants commission at OTS. And I applied for OTS twice, and they said, nope, I was not selected. So I applied for ROTC, and they said yes. So I had to leave active duty after about almost 6 years of enlisted and go right back to school. At that time, I already had my bachelor's degree, so I worked on my master's, and eventually I came back as a second lieutenant.
And you would have been around 30 at that point then.
30 years old. I commissioned one day before my 31st birthday. My recommendation is to find a good mentor, because they're going to help you a lot. I was surrounded by good people. But I had also made the decision that if I wasn't selected for a commissioning program, I would stay enlisted, and I would have just enjoyed and succeeded either way. I was prepared to do that.
How many years did you end up doing altogether in the Air Force?
I did 21 and a half, just under 14 years of active duty. In 2006, the Air Force, I was at Hawaii at that time, first lieutenant, and the Air Force had a reduction in force. So I had to leave active duty, not by choice, but they made the decision for me. I did 21 and a half years and about just under 14 years active duty and a lot of reserve time. Air Force Reserve is a great option. That worked out for me.
So after 21 years of service, you went into a civilian career.
So I was a part-time reserve and working full-time for the Air Force as a civil service servant. And my job was social work. It relates to personnel. It relates to human resources. My job was very much like a first sergeant as a civilian. I worked at the Airmen and Family Readiness Center for many years. My job was to take care of people, service members, and their families with a variety of programs, and something that I'm very passionate about. Perfect job for me.
Since your time being out of the Air Force, has that been your only career path that you've stuck with?
Correct. So I'm still a federal employee, and I worked at military. Now it's Military and Family Readiness. Worked there for about 14 years. When I was in the Air Force Reserve, I worked equal opportunity as well, which is a job that I really wanted. And now my job, I'm no longer working at Military and Family Readiness. I'm the organizational culture coordinator for my base, and it deals with diversity and inclusion and awareness and education of human relations, which is right up my alley.
Your experience in the Air Force, you actually took doing personnel and following that career path, and that's actually, you've stuck on that. So
Correct.
you've been in that industry now for 20 plus years.
Right. 24 years now.
You said you initially joined as a firefighter, which
Correct.
is much different than what you're doing now, but it pivoted you while you were into that career field.
Right.
And then you've found a passion for that and you've stayed in that career field ever since.
I've been very fortunate. And it also helps to know what you want and what you don't want. I think that's very important. To me, job satisfaction is more important than financial success, because you have to go to a job. I want to be passionate about it. I want to be happy to go in and excited and help people. And I've been fortunate enough to do that for a long time.
Yeah, it's really hard to show up and do a job if you're miserable every day, even if they give you a pay raise or give you more money. Because we spend so much time at work, almost half of your time awake every single day during the weekday is typically eaten up by work.
Correct.
Being compensated nicely doesn't always make up for the fact that you feel like you're spending your time doing something you're not actually enjoying. So now we're going to get into some fun questions. What was your best experience in the Air Force? Like hands down, where you're like, when you go out and you're hanging out with somebody and they're like, tell me about the best experience you ever had in the Air Force. Like, what is that memory that comes to mind?
Yeah, I have a lot, as you can imagine, but one of them is I've only been on one military aircraft, C-17. We went from Peterson Air Force Base at the time to Lakenheath Air Force Base in England. I was there TDY. When the TDY was over, my friend and I traveled around Europe. I love to travel. My friend came up with the silly idea and said, when we meet people at a bar or wherever, just say we're pilots. I was like, no, I'm going to tell them I work at McDonald's. And he's like, no, don't say that. So we met some British guys and my friend said, yeah, we're pilots for the Air Force. And they're like very impressed, and which we're not pilots or weren't. And we showed them pictures on the aircraft and they believed it, but that's just silliness. But the travel part is you have to go out and explore it. And I've taken advantage of that for many years.
Was that the only time that you traveled and told people that you were a pilot?
Yes.
Did you end up ever telling anybody that you ever worked at McDonald's?
No, and I never even worked at McDonald's. I was just being silly, but we never even told those two guys that we were just joking about being pilots. They believed it.
Still to this day, they thought they met two pilots.
Yeah.
What was your worst experience?
Being force-shaped, I had to leave active duty because the Air Force had too many first lieutenants at that time, or captains. That stung, but I met a good in-service recruiter, eventually became a chief, and she helped me transition into the reserve. And I had to go through my checklist about processing. We were in Hawaii. The thing that stung the most to me was when they said, go to security forces, now process with them. And they gave me a little razor, small razor. And they said, go to your car and remove the decal and bring the decal back to us. That hurt me because that was my entry into the Air Force base. I love the Air Force more than most people. That's how much I loved and still do love the Air Force. But the solution was I knew I was going to get to Peterson in Colorado Springs, join the reserve because I had my contract already signed, and get my decal back. Nowadays, those stickers are long gone.
I wonder if they're like collector's items now, if you could find them online or something.
And I'll search it to see if it's out there.
What was the best lesson that you learned while you were in the Air Force?
So I'm going to give you two brief examples. The first one is when I was in my first 4 years, people knew that I was going to get out. They would hear it from me. I wouldn't recommend people saying that just because it's going to eliminate some opportunities, understandably. I wasn't sent on some TDYs because they knew that I was going to get out. So I would say even keep your options open, but sometimes you have to keep your cards to yourself. The biggest lesson that I learned in the Air Force, and I'm thankful for, is resiliency. I was born in Los Angeles, and I come from a great family, but a lot of dysfunction, which is why I got kicked out of university. One of the biggest things that I learned is to take care of myself. If I can take care of myself, I can take care of my family. I can take care of my service members. The biggest lesson that I took is take care of yourself, because sometimes we want to take care of other people.
You can't fill somebody else's cup up if your cup is empty. I think about this a lot too, even with wanting to donate or help other people. And it's really hard when if you put yourself in a bad situation because you're trying to help other people. It's actually more important to get yourself in a good place place where you can help others long term, because helping them short term is only a temporary thing. But if you're in a good situation and you can help people for years or for decades, that's actually like a really important lesson to learn.
I'm a high paced. One of the things that I learned reduce stress was to jog. And I jogged for so many years because the Air Force makes you run. But then I discovered the benefits of jogging. It was my way to release, stress or pressure.
Kind of force yourself into enjoying something or appreciating something that the military is going to make you do regardless, because you're going to have to do your PT test. Most people don't like to be forced to do something or told to do something. And so if you find other ways to appreciate the thing that you have to do, definitely makes it a lot easier.
One of the resiliency lessons that I had to learn was balance your thinking. I was a little stressed because you're being timed, but I would always get an excellent. Look at your history. Are you always getting an excellent or close to it? If so, you're going to be fine.
What is one thing that's translated the most from your military experience over to your civilian life? So I know you're still staying as a government worker. So you're still in the same space. You still work on a base. Probably isn't as much of a difference that some other people experience when they completely get out of government work. From your personal experience, what's the one thing that's translated the most?
People were my job. People are my passion, but community is, I've always surrounded myself with good people. I found good people who would give me sound advice and mentor me. And often these were some friends who were maybe just a few pay grades above me. One of them was a tech sergeant. I was a senior airman at the time. He knew I wanted to get out after 4 years. And he said, you know what, Hugo, you can do whatever you want, but are you going to leave the Air Force in a better position than you came in? If the answer is no, why don't you either extend or re-enlist, get some more time, more education, finish your degree, and then get out. That's how come people have been so good to me. I've surrounded myself with good people.
Building a powerful network, a supportive network.
Yes.
So you had people that were looking out for you. And I'm sure some of those people you probably are still in contact with.
Absolutely.
But building that network is going to be super valuable for you long-term in life. Because as you all progress, you all become more successful over life, and then you all still have this connection and these ties. And so having a network is always a positive thing. What would your advice for people who are wanting to join right now?
I can speak about the Air Force because that was my journey. The Air Force is a great team. It is not a perfect team. That is normal. I don't think there exists a perfect team, but there's a lot of good that can come out of joining for 4 years or 6 years or 20 plus years, whatever time somebody serves. One of the things about joining the Air Force is they're going to train you. They're going to give you the experience that you need to do the job. They're investing in you. Sometimes people say that you lose your voice when you join the military in general, but I've never lost my voice. In fact, my voice got stronger because I was trained to do my job, but I balanced that with my personal life. And I also took advantage of opportunities and benefits in the Air Force. The Air Force paid for all of my education. I've traveled the world. I've met people from every state, sometimes different countries. I've done a lot of things that I would not have done if it wasn't for the Air Force. The Air Force is not the only way of life to do that, but it's a good opportunity for who was maybe in my position where needed that structure and discipline. And I was able to make up for lost time.
Some people say you might lose your voice. Realistically, like I've seen so many people that they grow out of their shell when they join the military. It's a different lifestyle going from their like living with their parents or living at home with their friends or whoever. They go in and it's super structured. You have to get up super early in the morning. You have a regimented bedtime. You have to eat meals at the same time every day. Most people have never lived a life identical to the military experience before the military. I've seen it build so many people's confidence. Like even the first week or two of basic training, you'll see people that are very shy, very timid. And by the end of basic training, they can call commands and they can use their voice and their confidence skyrocketed. It's really cool actually seeing people that are even on Airman Vision that reach out, they're nervous, they're uncomfortable, then they get out and then all of a sudden like they're this super confident person, they're really proud of themselves. I'd say more times than not, people definitely gain a voice. And they gain a lot of confidence in themselves.
Goes back to community and being surrounded. I remember 10 years ago, 8 years ago or so, I would facilitate classes. And a lot of them were junior enlisted airmen. And I would ask the question, how many of you know who Kyle Gott is? And almost every hand would go up. So it's one of the things that, what you've done for the community also is huge. I want to thank you for that as well.
Yeah, I appreciate that. That was when I joined, I didn't know what I was getting myself into. And I wished what I did existed when I joined. And so that's why I created what I created. Even when getting out, I reached out to some of the people that I knew that had gotten out and was like, how does this work? How does this work? And now I've been out for 6 years and haven't really documented. So now that's what this is going back and kind of collaborating with others that have done the same thing to really help everybody. Because not everybody that looks into joining the Air Force actually ends up joining the Air Force. They might join another branch. They might not join the military at all. But everybody that joins the Air Force, there is a time after the Air Force for them. And so that's kind of the cool full circle of this is going to be, not only was this channel able to help people join and, find their voice and build their confidence and build their life, help them continue doing that even after the Air Force. All right. So now that we've talked to the people that are wanting to join, what about the people that are currently in? These are the people that are in the beginning or the middle of their career, likely leaning towards still staying in, or they don't really have a plan yet to get out. What's your advice for somebody in that situation?
Enjoy the moment because it's going to go by so quick, whether it's 4 years or even 20 plus years. Surround yourself with good people and have curiosity to ask questions. And what is this? And tell me about that. And what's a special duty? And what about education? What about opportunities for if I don't like my job? I retrained. So I did enjoy the fire department, but I was not going to do that long term in the Air Force. And I had no idea that first term airmen have the opportunity to retrain. Of course, the needs of the Air Force come first. Your ASVAB scores are going to be a part of that as well. Do a good job, even if you don't like your job. That is going to open up doors for you. And that's one of the things that I didn't really enjoy being a firefighter overall, but I did a good job and it opened up other opportunities in my performance reports showed that. So when I applied to retrain, it was already on paper.
It's really hard to be like, hey, I want to take this other opportunity, but you don't have anybody that'll vouch for you as being a good worker because one, all they have to go off of is your work ethic because they don't know how you're going to perform in that other job because you've not done it. Always do a good job, even if you don't necessarily like the job, because your work ethic and people vouching for you, that goes into building a network. Because if you can get somebody to refer you, most people actually get their jobs because of a referral or they know somebody that knows somebody. Being a hard worker, no matter what situation you're in, if you want out of that career path, actually your best option is to do really good in that career path that you dislike. It allowed you the opportunity to have people vouch for you and help push you into that next stage.
I'll add that is know your strengths and weaknesses. My strengths are people. My weakness is technology. I'm not crazy about it. And I was fortunate enough to know what the team that I worked with could do.
To top it off, what's your advice for the people that are at the end of their time in the Air Force? This could be somebody that's, 3 years out and they're already committed to, yep, I'm getting out after my time is up, or the people that literally just freshly separated. And then even beyond that, people that have maybe been out for a few years. So what's your advice to those people on how they can, leverage their military experience in that time and have that benefit their life today as much as possible?
I would say have a plan A and plan B. I love to know what you want to do, know what you don't want to do when you transition, or if you've already transitioned. If you have clarity on what you want to do, next thing is how are you going to get there? Networking is extremely important. Nowadays, you can network with people. They don't even have to be in the same city as you. We live in different states. But networking is going to really help you as well.
So we've only met one time in person, actually. And that was this year. But we've been in contact since pre-2016. Kind of crazy. It's been, 8 years. And we've only actually met in person one time. And it was just for dinner. It was for like an hour.
Networking goes a long way. Know what you want to do, what you don't want to do. That's equally important as well. What's worked for me is sometimes with a job, whether it's the military or outside, everything's going to be temporary. I would look at my friends and say, why do they have their careers and I'm not there? But you know what? You have to have a vision and that's going to help you. And you're going to have to put in the work to make that happen as well. I also managed the transition program, TAP, Transition Assistance Program, for 4 years. And I was passionate about that. And you would be surprised how many senior enlisted or even officers would be stressed about the transition. And I would tell them, hey, same thing I just said right now is, network. There's a lot of resources. You just have to know about them. And if you don't know, start asking. That's where the network comes in as well, because someone can tell you, do you know about this program or that program? Skill Bridge, the list goes on and on. There's a lot of opportunities out there.
That's actually something that I've recently learned in my career is even your resume is not actually to brag about what you've done in your previous jobs. It's how does what you did in your previous job apply to the job that you are applying for? So as a hiring manager, I'm going to look at your resume. And if I'm reading, I'm like, cool, you're talking about all these things that you did for this other company. But if none of that translates to what I need you to do for the job that you just applied for, I'm going to skip over it. There's things that you can do and leverage in your time of getting out your last year, your last 2 years to really focus on, like you said, knowing what you want to do and what you don't want to do. Because when I got out, I was like, I did maintenance for 6 years. So I focused on my maintenance aspect. So it was really hard to get a job because I was positioning myself for a job that I didn't actually want to do. It was a good learning lesson because that was my strongest thing on my resume because I wasn't positioning my resume I was a manager when I ran a section. I oversaw 6 people. I ran their schedules. I improved efficiencies within that section, right? I helped create streamlined processes. In you running that, I'm sure you saw a lot of people come in that they don't realize how to position themselves. And that's what TAP is for, is actually to help position yourself out.
You should know your hard skills, which is what you've been trained to do, and your soft skills. Your soft skills are problem solve, I can think outside the box, etc. You would be surprised how many Air Force, young and old, enlisted and officer, were scared of the interview process. That's coming your way. So you're going to have to interview for jobs. And the best and final advice I can say is know your strengths and weaknesses, know what you bring to the team, and also think, is this the right team for me as well?
Having experience is invaluable. So the more that you interview, I actually suggest that people should do more interviews or get out and do public speaking or talk to others and network a lot more. Get out of your comfort zone. If that perfect job does roll around and you are not confident in your speaking abilities or your interviewing abilities, you might have that perfect opportunity slip through your hands because you weren't preparing yourself over the previous months or years to be in a position to do that. You might have the skills for it. You might be the best candidate, but if the person on the other side of that camera or the other side of that desk, you're not able to convince them that you're the best candidate, then you're not getting the job. Unfortunately, like that's the way it works. And so having the skills is just as important as also being able to convince somebody that you can do the job. And a lot of that comes with confidence in your skills, but also confidence just talking to people in general. I know one of the big things that we actually had to do when I was transitioning out was like we had to do mock interviews with each other and work with each other. The interview is the gateway into getting a job. If you bomb every interview you're in, you're not getting a job. So since you taught TAP for 4 years, what interview advice do you have for others? Because you've worked with people for so long now.
Well, it's coming your way. You're going to interview first and foremost. Second is know yourself. Know what you want. Know your strengths, know your weaknesses. Don't be too long-winded. And they don't know that they just spoke 4 minutes or so, or 3 minutes. Know what you bring to the team. Know about that organization. Sometimes
that's a really important one.
Yes, no, do your research. And sometimes there's going to be a curveball question that you weren't even expecting. And that was part of senior TAP or executive TAP. And one of the questions, this is just an example, is we're having a potluck this Friday. What are you bringing to the potluck? A random out of nowhere question. And then the last thing is this: if you don't know the answer, don't tap dance. Just come up front and say, you know, that's a great question, but unfortunately, I don't know that right now, but I can definitely look into it. And practice your interviews.
There's a lot of organizations, actually, since being out, I've learned that there's a lot of veteran-based organizations that do get-togethers and stuff like that. So just putting yourself out there and speaking with others, you're going to meet a lot of successful veterans. They might be able to give you advice or connections, but also you going out and putting yourself into a public space and having to meet new people and talk. It's not necessarily a direct interview. However, talking with others builds your confidence with talking. So whether you're talking to a stranger that you just met at an event or you're talking to a hiring manager, they kind of cross over a little bit. And so more exposure to more people is always going to be a good thing. All right. Do you have anything else, Hugo, that you wanted to share? I know you have your YouTube channel. You shared some information about Air Force life, Air Force money.
2013, December, I started Your Military Money, where I would talk about finances. Nobody went to it. I was a financial counselor for the Air Force, and I love finances. So then I started talking about my Air Force journey, and it got some traction. And then I post there occasionally still, but there's a lot of good things that I've talked about, sometimes with people, and shared experiences and journeys and what I got to do. I have Instagram, my personal Instagram. If you type in Hugo Escobar, but It's one word, Dead Red Ghosts.
You've been on YouTube. You were one of the earlier creators as far as Air Force information on YouTube goes as well. It's an honor to be able to share this platform with you and be able to have you on here.
Yeah. You have 195,000
yeah.
subscribers on Airman Vision, which says a lot.
It still doesn't make sense to me because I just grew up in small town Iowa. I'm just a normal person. A really cool experience to see how I'm just such a normal person and how my advice was able to help so many people, and then how I was able to not only share my advice but bring in multiple other people to share their advice on this platform and really create a community that is building others up through joining the military and then life after the military as well.
And like thousands of people, I've enjoyed watching your journey as well.
I appreciate it, Hugo.
Thank you, Kyle.